Hey, Brian, what time is it?
It's Patchwork Stay-cation time!
Hello, all you patchworkers. We're excited to be back with you for another session, and we have a lot to cover, so let's get busy looking at the blocks. As you can see in front of me, we're again going to approach two blocks today. This block, the black one, is your Montgomery, which is on page 4, and the blue block is the corn and beans, and that block is on page 9. As we look at the Montgomery block laying on the table, one of your free handouts is going to be a little info about Jefferson Davis, because Jefferson Davis was the first president of the Confederacy, and he was sworn in on the steps at Montgomery. Now let's take a look at the breakdown for using AccuQuilt. Now this center section I would continue to do as it's written in the book. I would not change that. So that center AB remains the same. Your A would be number 1, C would be number 3, and D would be number 2, all using your 6-inch cube. Again, that center square, there would be no advantage to cutting it any way other than what is in the book. But with rulers, the thing, if you look at the center section, I'm going to keep that AB, and remember last time we talked about connectors. There are times that connectors are your best friend, and this is one of those, because the math between what a AccuQuilt would do or what I would do with rulers doesn't give me the writing space. And this is the block that in your quilt is the center top block, and I write, on the past ones, I've written my name and the year that I did the quilt. Now, if you weren't going to write on that, you could use any method in the world to do it, but I wanted to leave myself enough room and a fabric that I could write on and see my name. So let me turn the block. Let me show you something kind of interesting. Here's actually what the block is, and we're framing it off. So now let's look at it this way. It's now just a tic-tac-toe board. That's all it is. So you could easily put this as a solid square if you made up your mind that you were not going to do anything else with it. But what I want to show you is everything we've cut before. I want to show you how you would just assemble one little corner unit. Now, I have laid out a segment of another color, and it's just so you'll be able to see this particular element. We've made half square triangles, and that's the number C in your pattern. And we have also made quarter square triangles. These were the geese that we did in the last session, and those are your E's. If you are doing ruler work, I can do all of this. These little guys right here, your E's, I cut from a 1 1/4 inch strip with my quarter square triangle. Then the C, I'm going to cut from a 3 1/2 inch strip with my half square triangle. So as we look at the block, the fact that we're going to do C as a 3 1/2 cut with a ruler, or 3 7/8 if it's traditional, that tells me that this is a 9-inch block, because that's going to finish 3, that's going to finish 3, and that's going to finish 3. So what you've really got to be careful about is this clean cut. So I'm going to sew 2 of my E's together, a light and a dark, and a dark and a light. And I'm just sewing right through the middle, making 2 sets. And then I'm going to put one of those sets to the square, and then I'm going to come in and put the other set to the square, and then I'm going to join that. Now, I'm not going to sew this today because this, again, is just practicing on what you're doing with joining your half squares and your quarter squares, whether you're doing this traditional ruler or AccuCut. But there are some things with AccuQuilt in the same cube, you can't get this mix match. So I would recommend that you probably give this one a shot as either traditional as it's written in the book, or your half square and your quarter square ruler. So I make 4 of those, put on 4 squares. If you are going to use your center as a signing spot, go from there. Now, you know from past videos, if it was a 9-inch block and we were going to turn it on point, we first sashed it to get it to 10, because when we turn 10 on point, it would be one of our 14s if we elected. Now let me show you what's a little bit unusual about this fellow. If you notice on looking at these points, I've already cut that point off. So in order to square this off and have it remain a 12-inch block, now hear this, your corners must be the same fabric as that square is, or let's say you made this pink and you put these white. When you fold this, it will be quite clear that you have missed your seam. So we are going to take off a little bit of that corner square once we square this off. So if you went back and looked at some of your other blocks, if they were 9-inch blocks, you could frame them off to be a 12 if the corner square and this could be the same so that you didn't lose seam allowance. This is really a very easy little block to put together, and your decisions will just simply be, what color do I want it, and do I want the sign in the center? Now, a little bit of info on this side. In the book, and you know this from previous conversation, we overcut these sides. I can cut them exact. If this block is exact, and I want this to be 12, I know for sure that these corners are 6-inch half square triangles, because 6 and 6 is 12. So if this is 9.5 as it lays on the table, exact, then you can use your half square ruler and you can cut a 6.5-inch strip and you would be able to get this. If you worked out of the book, you could cut a pure 6 7/8, but the book is telling you to cut it larger because we did, at this time frame 20 years ago, give you a little bit more room for flexibility. Now, our second block is corn and beans, which is on page 9. This is one that if you look at your diagram at the bottom of page 9, the illustration of 7, the piecing diagram. A lot of people get all of their elements cut, lay them down, and then just start stitching with no regard to the order that you're stitching. I am telling you that if you don't sew this exactly like this book's going to tell you, you're going to be doing some set-in work and some Y seams. If you have an 8-inch cube and you are using AccuQuilt, your A is die 3, B is die 5, and C is die 4. This is my 30s corn and beans, and I actually, one of my early 30s fabrics did have a little corn stalk. So that's what I've used in this. And as you look at the illustration, this is how you want to sew it. Now, you know from past how I tell you if there's 4 things that are exactly the same, stack those 4 on top of each other, and that'll help you sew a little bit cleaner. So these corner, I first make my half square corner, then I put on 2 half squares on the side, and then I join the long seam, and I make 4 of those. Here's what's a little bit different about this. Now, we made flying geese last time, so you know for sure how to do these flying geese right here. You want 4 flying geese, and then you're going to sew half square triangles on the sides, a pair, and that gives us this little wedge, and I'm going to pull these in. Now let's pretend I'm sewing, which I don't think you need to just see me sew a straight seam at this point. Now, that's what it's going to look like after I put that element on, and that's your BC element in your diagram. Those go on. Then I come back and I put my A's on the corner, and there's my block. I have to admit that I sew a lot from memory, which isn't as good as it used to be. And I started sewing the very first one of these because I don't do what I say do. I just do what I think I should. I started over here and I had to rip out because you can't make that unit, which is really just like that unit, but you can't make it first because you'll do set-in work. You'll have Y seams and stuff. So make sure you form that center square first, and then you'll be ready to go. So here is my black colorway, and I sure love the way this one turned out. And it's a little less busy than this, and I want to turn this over because I want you to see that seam pressing gets real critical here. And you may find, you can see that I'm showing you this on purpose. I really am. Because you can see that I didn't press this one open, but I did take all of these open. You still will get a pretty good seam without taking both of these open. But if you notice how flat this all lays, let's take a look. Let me show you the blue one, which I did correctly. You see, when you press open, you have that little valley, almost like a little goose right there. And that will help you when you cross that, because this is a flat surface. This is the point. So I'm going to put this fellow on top of these as I'm sewing so that I don't lose these critical points coming around the side. The block I have in front of me is the Harriet Tubman block. Now, as you look at the quilts behind me, those are both Harriet Tubman. Now, this is another one of the Voices of the Past series pattern that is available on the website. It is not a free pattern because I told you I'm doing my black one a little bit different, and I wanted one like this in my black colorway. So I love the movement of this block. I had such a great time researching Harriet Tubman, and for those of you who are moviegoers, there is a new movie out, relatively new, about Harriet Tubman's life. And I tell you, I just recently saw it, and it is a fabulous movie. So if you're into some women's history and a little bit of a documentation about the Underground Railroad during the Civil War, quite frankly, and the fact that she even served as a spy during the Civil War, working to free her people. So I wanted one in mind, but also, because we're talking about Harriet Tubman, and you know I like for you to have something to play with in your free stuff, you're going to have a Harriet Tubman word find. Now, this is another one of those optional things. You use it or you don't use it. Also in the free stuff, we've got a free pattern for you called Hovering Hawks. But I'll tell you why I decided to make it one of the free patterns. It is a 12-inch block as it lays on the table because I used 4, 4, and 4. It's another tic-tac-toe board. I'm telling you, folks, you should be able to draft this by yourself for any size you want. So it's a 4, 8, 12. Let's say you wanted to make it a 9 and you wanted to turn it on point, as I did Montgomery, because these corners are the same color. You could do that. You would just make this a 9. Your pattern will have the directions for traditional, ruler, and AccuQuilt on the handout for a 12-inch block. You will need to do your own math if you decide to make it a 9-inch block. But all I do is I have 3 squares, and mine is a 12, so these are 4.5. Everything else is a 2.5 with a half square ruler. So this really was an easy one to do. And then here's my blue colorway, because I'm going to put this in all 3 of my quilts. So this is the blue colorway, and here's my 30s. As you look at the quilt that I have on the table, I want to start addressing your settings. If you look on page 15 in your book, you will see the breakout of how this quilt's assembled. I don't think it's as clear, especially if you're fairly new at this. So what I have done is I sat down with a little pencil and a piece of paper, and I just drew off grids. I didn't draw the blocks, but you can download this, and it's not intended for publication because I just sat down and did it. Because I think if I give you the math for this, like these are 2 inches, because we're staying on this 2-inch grid. So if I give you the math for this, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I know that this unit right here ends up being a 4 by 12. So what I've done is I pulled this away from and this away, and I call this a 4 by 12. And then I went back and called this section a 4 by 12, and on and on. As you work on your blocks, much of this could be cut ahead of time because I already cut 2-inch squares there, so I could cut 2-inch squares there at the same time. If you build these components as you work, I just said this is a 12-inch block and this is a 12-inch block and this is a 12-inch block, but that's a 14-inch block. Now, if you decide you want that 14-inch block living up here where a 12 is going to live, then you got to work that one out yourself because I've given you the breakouts, and I did this exactly how I would sew it. Once you get this handout in front of you, you're going to go, well, I'd sew it this way. There's no rule that says you have to sew it the way I sewed it. There probably are 4 or 5 choices about the method that you would use. I do the one that's easiest as I'm looking at it. And I don't mind if that was a square in the drawing, I don't mind making it a half square. I don't think there should be any rules for this because for those of you who are doing such a great job on your color choices, this is where you get to make it your own. I told you I was going to do the blue one exactly like the book. Well, that wasn't true. I'm doing a combination of look because as it turned out on the blue one, I wanted this Kansas Troubles block to be my 14 because I just love the movement of that block. So I think that you should feel free to alter the pattern in any form you choose to, the setting any way you choose to, and then we'll get a little deeper in this on our next session. I am very proud of all of you because I'm seeing some fabulous piecing efforts with those points being spot on, and even some new sewers, new piecers who are saying, I got my points. That is what we're after as we work through this. Thank you for joining us on another Sunday, and have a great time putting your blocks together. See you next Sunday.